Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining me today. My name is Ashton Hunter, for those of you that don't know. In today's video, we're going to be talking about something that I see nobody talk about because everybody is focusing on the wrong things. So buckle up, this is going to be a really good video. So let's jump into it. So number one, in the world of business, there's a lot of very surface level things. So if you go on TikTok, if you go on Instagram, if you go on YouTube, there is a lot of information that's valuable information. We know this, but this information is extremely surface level. So they're focusing on, the cherry of the cherry and the foam on top of the sundae instead of the actual sundae. And when people focus on this sort of stuff, it leads to worse results, right? And it just leads to you just making less money. But there's a reason why people follow this advice. And it's simply due to the fact that it's shiny. It looks good. It's something that is attractive for the person who doesn't have a good understanding of how business actually works and how it's based on the foundations and the fundamentals. So this video, if you're interested in chasing a shiny object, is going to be extremely boring for you. Why? Because I'm going to talk about the fundamentals. I'm going to talk about inputs versus outputs. And last but not least, I'm going to be talking about the most important equation in business. Not all this crazy Facebook ad stuff, not all this crazy surface level stuff. We're going to be talking about how this really truly resonates with not just with the business, not just what your business is doing, but with the market, with human psychology, because those two dictate kind of everything: your offer, your sales ability, marketing systems, all that stuff that falls within those two categories. So let's jump into it. So number one, we have to define our inputs and we have to define our outputs. No one talks about this. It's very weird. You have to realize that, okay, if you were to make a mechanism that you put something into and you get something out of, what would that mechanism be? And what would you put in to get something out? Let's say I wanted more money. So the output is money. Okay, what do I put in? Is it time? Is it money to get more money? You know what I mean? Is it specifically some sort of skill? Is it specifically some sort of book? Is it specifically some sort of factor to get money, right? So number one is you have to define your inputs and you have to define your outputs, right? Because this resonates exactly with the equation. So I'm going to put it somewhere up on the screen. But pretty much what the equation is your current position, right? So your current position right here, plus your plan. So again, your output, like what is your input, like your plan to put in something to get what you want. So your current position plus your plan times your daily execution to the power of time equals your dream, right? So the reason why it's your daily execution to the power of time is because it is exponential, right? So for the first few years, things are, or maybe first few months, first few years, things are going to be really slow. You're not going to make a lot of progress, right? Most people are trying to get rich extremely quickly. They want to get rich in, a year. They want to be multi-millionaires within a year or 2 years. Doesn't work like that, right? It's an exponential graph, right? So point number one is once you understand this equation, I'm going to just repeat it again. Current situation plus your plan times your daily execution to the power of time equals your dream, right? So this equation, once you understand that, you have to then define, again, your inputs and your outputs. So you have to define your daily execution. What does that look like on that plan, right? And then put time into it. So your daily execution and that plan. So again, what is your input? Because you have to put in a discernible input to get a wanted output. Most people are just doing business. Most people are just lifting with the intent of lifting without knowing their output, what they want from it, or their input. It's like me going to the gym and just doing a bunch of bicep curls and just doing it just cause, right? It's like, no, I'm doing bicep curls because I want to get this big arms during this bulk. And then at the end of this bulk, I'm going to do a cut and I want my biceps to be bigger, right? It's a clear input, clear output. I'm going to do this many sets, this many working sets, whatever. Eat this much food. Same thing with your business. So most people are just wandering, right? I don't know my output. I don't know what my inputs are. I'm just gonna just wander and kind of see how things work, right? Doesn't work like that. You're just gonna keep wandering around while other people who have a plan and they're taking daily action on that plan and doing the same inputs every day with no shiny object syndrome, they're the ones that are gonna beat you, and it's not even gonna be close in the next few years, pretty much, because it just compounds over and over again, like I said, with the equation, right? So like I said, pretty much most people are just kind of running around with their heads cut off like chickens because they don't have an input and they don't know their outputs, right? So number one, this is your call to action. Take out a piece of paper, open a Google document, whatever, and I want you to write down what you want, right? Is it a goal for a certain amount of money? Is it a certain amount of time? Is it something? Just write down something that you want, right? What you want out of what you're doing, right? Now, next, I need you to find what to actually do to get to that goal. Just to give you a representation in my business, what I'm doing basically is I'm spending money. So my inputs are paid advertisements. So I'm spending money to get money, right? I just dropped like 10K on a mentorship. I'm spending money to gain knowledge, right? I'm making YouTube videos kind of like this. I'm making TikToks, right? And I'm obviously running a business on top of that, right? So my daily execution is taking initiative on my business, creating content, learning new skills, right? That is my inputs, sharpening those, getting those locked in, getting those dialed in, right? My dream is to have more money, right? I don't want to get into specifics, but have more money and obviously, have a lifestyle that is what I want. All right, so define these. Don't wander around with your chicken like a chicken with your head cut off. And then lastly, I'm just going to show you one thing here. When you actually implement this and you start on this, you're really going to want to switch to other things. You're going to be like, oh, there's this other tactic that can help me get here quicker. There's this other thing that's going to help this happen faster. And this is when 90% of people, 95% of people will diverge to something else just because what they're doing isn't shiny, right? So me, for example, when I started my business, I started just over a year ago, and I was doing my business model. It was a social media marketing agency. I'm still doing the same thing, but I started it, and then about a month in, I was hearing a lot of stuff about SaaS. I was hearing stuff about software as a service, starting a software company. And I was like, oh my God, I should start a software company. That'd be amazing, right? And then I said, no, I'm going to focus on this. So I said no. And then a little bit later, it came up again. And I was like, no, I'm going to cut it off. I'm not going to do it. And then later, I think something else came out about some other business model, like a content creator growth model or something. I don't know. I was looking into it. Again, it was attractive. It was interesting. Shiny object. Didn't do it, right? So I've had all these things that have distracted me, while the average person who would have gone the same path as me would have diverged to something else, and they would have to restart their inputs to get the same output, right? So when you're going down this path, there's going to be lots of things that are going to be diverging, but you just have to define your output, define your input, and just kind of do that every single day. Now I'm going to actually show you just briefly, just because we're ending the video here, about how this actually comes together, right? So pretty much how this comes together is quite simple. So a lot of people, they don't realize the amount of volume it takes to get to their goals, right? So for example, and I'm not even like at the end of this right now. I've only been in this business for about just over a year, but your success in business, reaching your output, compounds. Like I said in the equation, it is a exponential equation, right? So the things you put in today will have a mass effect in the future, right? So it's like the law of compounding effect, pretty much. So let's say you put in some input 2 years ago that is now just paying off today because it's compounding, right? But what happens is what inputs you put in 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 2 years ago, you end up forgetting when you actually receive the results of it. So your memory over time goes like this. It's like a backwards exponential graph, right? While success is the opposite, right? So when you're forgetting your inputs, you're receiving your outputs. So it's quite interesting. Um, so just realize that when you're receiving these things, you know that you've been putting in these inputs and they're not just coming out of nowhere, right? For example, in July, I had a client call me from this. He rejected me. I did a sales presentation. He wasn't interested, and he calls me like 3 months later, and he's like, "Hey, I wanna do work now, right?" And then I was like, "Oh wow!" So my inputs 4 or 5 months ago that weren't paying off, now they're paying off now, right? So it's just like the ultimate just thesis of delayed gratification, but not actually seeing your inputs because you're going to be forgetting them. So keep that in the back of your mind and understand this equation, understand your inputs, understand your outputs. I don't usually make videos talking a lot about like this sort of basic stuff. But again, I warned you. If you made it to the end, I know this video was kind of boring, but it's a very applicable video that every business owner, every person needs to understand, because most people will wake up at like 30, 35, and they'll be like, oh crap, I could have been doing these inputs the entire time, right? So just break it down. What do you have to do on a daily basis? Make it simple. I started with 30 minutes a day. You don't have to start with 3 hours a day. You can start with fucking 10 minutes a day, right? Just know that this compounds. And if you allow the law of compounding effect to work in your favor, then you will be a lot further ahead than somebody who goes in the opposite direction and compounds for the worse. Because compounding can happen for the worse with drugs, with alcohol, with partying, with degeneracy, right? Or it can happen for you, right? So you have to make the decision, is it going to happen for you, or is it going to happen against you? Hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you.